Welcome to War Bias, the podcast where we delve into the most pivotal battles in history, and I'm your host, General Biography. Today we're going to explore one of the most grueling and intense conflicts of the Korean War, the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge. This brutal fight, which took place in 1951, would test the mettle of American and French troops as they clashed with a determined North Korean and Chinese enemy in the rugged mountains of Korea. The masterful landing, which caught the North Koreans off guard, allowed UN forces to establish a foothold on the Korean peninsula and begin their push northwards towards the 38th parallel. As the United Nations forces advanced, they encountered increasingly stiff resistance from the North Korean army, which was being bolstered by Chinese troops. The battlefield was shifting towards the mountainous terrain of central Korea, where the landscape would play a significant role in the upcoming battle. In the summer of 1951, the U.S. X-Corps, led by General Edward Almond, was tasked with securing the Punch Bowl, a strategic valley surrounded by towering mountains. The Punch Bowl was a key location as it controlled access to the port city of Hungnam and the vital supply lines that sustained the UN forces. However, the North Koreans had other plans, and they fortified the surrounding hills, including the notorious Heartbreak Ridge, with entrenched troops, bunkers, and barbed wire. The enemy's defensive positions were carefully crafted to exploit the natural terrain, funneling American troops into killing zones where they could be cut down by withering machine gun fire. The Korean War was a conflict marked by brutal fighting, shifting alliances, and a complex web of international politics. The United Nations, led by the United States, had intervened in the war to prevent a communist takeover of the peninsula. However, as the war dragged on, it became increasingly clear that the conflict was not just about Korea, but about the global balance of power during the Cold War. In the summer of 1951, the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division, under the command of General Robert B. McClure, began to probe the North Korean defenses around the Punch Bowl. The division's 23rd Regimental Combat Team, led by Colonel James Y. Adams, was tasked with securing the high ground, including Heartbreak Ridge. The French battalion, attached to the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division, would also play a crucial role in the upcoming battle. These seasoned soldiers, many of whom were veterans of World War II and the Indochina conflict, brought a unique set of skills and experiences to the fight. Their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Montclair, was a charismatic leader who would inspire his troops to perform heroic feats in the face of overwhelming odds. The French battalion was known for its bravery and tenacity, and they would prove to be a valuable asset to the American forces during the battle. As we move closer to the start of the battle, it's essential to understand the terrain and the challenges it posed to both sides. Heartbreak Ridge, with its steep slopes, rocky outcroppings, and sparse vegetation, was a nightmare for infantrymen. The ridge itself was a series of interconnected hills, each one steeper and more treacherous than the last. The North Koreans had carefully prepared their defenses, using the natural terrain to funnel American troops into killing zones, where they could be cut down by withering machine gun fire. The Americans, on the other hand, would have to contend with the harsh conditions of the Korean summer. The temperatures were sweltering, often reaching over 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and the humidity was oppressive. The terrain was unforgiving, with steep slopes and rocky outcroppings that made every step a challenge. The soldiers would have to carry heavy packs, loaded with ammunition, food, and water, as they climbed up the ridge, making them easy targets for the enemy. In the days leading up to the battle, U.S. artillery and air support pounded the North Korean positions, trying to soften them up for the impending assault. However, the enemy remained entrenched, and their defenses seemed impregnable. As the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division prepared to launch its assault on Heartbreak Ridge, the soldiers knew that they were in for the fight of their lives. The terrain was treacherous, the enemy was formidable, and the stakes were high. The question on everyone's mind was, could the Americans crack the North Korean defenses and secure the high ground, or would they succumb to the brutal conditions and the relentless pressure of the enemy? The answer would only be revealed in the fire and blood of battle. The soldiers of the 2nd Infantry Division were a mix of seasoned veterans and fresh-faced recruits, all united by their determination to succeed. They had been trained for this moment, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they geared up for the battle, they knew that they would have to rely on each other, on their training, and on their courage to overcome the enemy. The outcome was far from certain, But one thing was clear: only one side could emerge victorious. The question was, which side would it be? The answer would have to wait, as the battle for Heartbreak Ridge was about to unfold in all its brutal and bloody glory. As the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division launched its assault on Heartbreak Ridge on September 13, 1951, the soldiers were met with a maelstrom of artillery and small arms fire that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The North Korean defenses, despite being pounded by U.S. artillery and air support, remained remarkably resilient, like an unyielding behemoth that refused to be swayed. The Americans, undaunted by the ferocity of the enemy's response, pushed forward with dogged determination, their training and discipline allowing them to maintain a semblance of order in the chaos. The initial assault was led by the 23rd Infantry Regiment, which aimed to secure the northern slope of Heartbreak Ridge. The soldiers, weighed down by heavy packs and struggling through the treacherous terrain, made slow but steady progress up the ridge, their boots sinking into the muddy soil as they climbed. As they ascended, they were subjected to a withering barrage of machine gun fire, mortars, and artillery shells, which tore through their ranks with deadly precision, sending shrapnel whizzing past their ears and ripping through their uniforms. The landscape itself seemed to conspire against the Americans, as the steep slopes and jagged outcroppings of rock forced them to navigate a maze of narrow ridges and gullies. Every step forward was a battle in miniature, with soldiers scrambling for cover behind boulders or scurrying through the underbrush to avoid the hail of bullets. Despite the intense enemy fire, the Americans managed to establish a tenuous foothold on the ridge, with elements of the 23rd Infantry Regiment reaching the crest by September 15. However, their gains were short-lived, as the North Koreans launched a series of fierce counterattacks which threatened to drive the Americans back down the mountain. The enemy's tactics were relentless and unpredictable, like a hydra-headed monster that sprouted new attacks with every passing moment. One moment, the Americans would be pinned down by a withering barrage of artillery fire. The next, they would face a wave of suicidal infantry assaults, as North Korean soldiers hurled themselves at the American lines with reckless abandon. One of the most critical moments of the battle came on September 16, when a company of the 23rd Infantry Regiment found itself surrounded and cut off from the rest of the battalion. The situation was dire, with the Americans facing annihilation unless they could be relieved quickly. It was then that Lieutenant Colonel Matthew B. Ridgway, Jr., son of General Matthew Ridgway, commander of the U.S. 8th Army, rallied his men for a desperate bid to break through to the besieged company. Ridgway's men, fighting their way up the ridge through intense enemy fire, managed to break through to the surrounded company and escort them to safety. This heroic action not only saved the lives of dozens of American soldiers, but also helped to maintain the momentum of the U.S. assault on Heartbreak Ridge. As the Americans continued to push forward, they encountered scenes of unimaginable horror, mangled bodies, torn flesh, and the acrid stench of death that clung to every rock and tree like a malignant spirit. The fighting was intense and brutal, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. On September 18, the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division launched a fresh assault on the southern slope of Heartbreak Ridge, aiming to outflank the enemy and cut off their supply lines. The assault was preceded by a massive artillery barrage, which pounded the North Korean positions with thousands of shells. The Americans then followed up with a series of infantry attacks, which slowly but surely began to wear down the enemy's defenses. As the days passed, the North Koreans found themselves increasingly isolated and vulnerable, their supply lines cut off and their ammunition dwindling. Their situation was akin to that of a cornered animal, desperate and ferocious in its last-ditch defense. By September 20, the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division had finally secured the crest of Heartbreak Ridge, marking a major turning point in the battle. The North Koreans, realizing that their position was untenable, began to withdraw from the ridge, leaving behind large quantities of equipment and supplies. As the Americans consolidated their gains, they were met with an eerie silence, punctuated only by the occasional crackle of small arms fire and the moans of the wounded. The landscape itself seemed to be scarred and shattered, as if the very earth had been torn asunder by the conflict. In the aftermath of the battle, the full extent of the carnage became clear. The U.S. 2nd Infantry Division had suffered over 3,500 casualties, including more than 400 killed in action. The North Koreans had lost an estimated 10,000 men, with many more wounded or captured. As General Matthew Ridgway would later remark, the Battle for Heartbreak Ridge was a microcosm of the entire war, a struggle for dominance, fought in some of the most inhospitable terrain on Earth, with both sides willing to pay any price in blood and treasure to emerge victorious. The battle may have been won, but at what cost? Only time would tell if the sacrifices made on Heartbreak Ridge would ultimately prove worth it. As the dust settled on Heartbreak Ridge, the U.S. 10th Infantry Division began to consolidate its gains, securing the crest of the ridge and establishing a new defensive line amidst the eerie silence that followed the cacophony of war. The once pristine landscape was now scarred by the relentless artillery bombardments, with craters pockmarking the hillsides like an unforgiving moonlit surface. In the weeks and months that followed, the U.S. military worked tirelessly to tend to the wounded, bury the dead, and restore order to the shattered landscape. The sheer scale of the destruction was staggering, with entire villages reduced to rubble, their thatched roofs blown away, and their inhabitants either displaced or deceased. As General James Van Fleet, commander of the U.S. 8th Army, would later remark in a somber tone, the battle for Heartbreak Ridge was a grim reminder of the terrible price we pay for freedom and the unyielding resolve of our soldiers in the face of overwhelming odds. The weight of his words hung heavy over the devastated landscape, a poignant reflection on the human cost of conflict. As the news of the battle's outcome reached the United States, it was met with a mix of relief and somber reflection. The American public, already weary of the war's seemingly endless grind, began to question the true cost of victory and the wisdom of continued involvement in Korea. In Washington, policymakers and strategists pored over maps and intelligence reports, searching for a way to bring the conflict to a swift and decisive conclusion. They debated long into the night, fueled by coffee and conviction, as they weighed the pros and cons of escalation versus diplomacy. The battle's legacy extends far beyond the confines of the Korean War itself, serving as a powerful reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of honoring the memories of those who have served. It would be etched into the annals of military history alongside other pivotal battles, its name becoming synonymous with courage under fire. Today, the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge is remembered as one of the most pivotal and brutal engagements of the Korean War, a clash of steel and flesh that left an indelible mark on the landscape and the soldiers who fought there. The ridge itself, once a battleground, has been transformed into a place of pilgrimage and reflection, a somber reminder of the devastating consequences of war and the enduring power of courage and sacrifice. Visitors from around the world make the journey to this hallowed ground, seeking to understand the complexities of conflict and pay their respects to the fallen. It is a clash of wills, a test of strength, and a measure of character. These words echo through the ages, a timeless reflection on the nature of conflict and the human condition. The battle may be over, but its impact continues to resonate, a powerful reminder of the importance of understanding our shared history and honoring the memories of those who have served. The legacy of Heartbreak Ridge also serves as a poignant reminder of the psychological toll of war on those who fight it. Soldiers who survive the battle would carry the scars of their experiences with them for the rest of their lives, a lasting testament to the enduring power of trauma. Their stories, told and untold, are a powerful reminder of the human cost of conflict, a cost that extends far beyond the battlefield. Their stories, their sacrifices, and their bravery must never be forgotten. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography, reminding you to keep marching toward victory.